To the National Archives Know Your Records program. My name is Andrea Bassing-Matney, and we are broadcasting live from the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. We're so glad that you have joined us. Before we begin, there are a few tips I'd like to share with you. For those of you joining us here on site, we will take your questions at the end of the program. We just ask that you use the microphones in the aisles when you have your questions. We also have those of you who are watching on YouTube. For those of you who are looking at us on your computer, you can also ask questions. Just sign into the chat and ask questions, and I will ask Mr. Hartley your questions for you. You will also find several hyperlinks on this web page. One will take you to the presentation slides that you can download. There's also a link to the handout, and you'll also find a link to the captioning. For today's presentation, Chief Librarian Jeff Hartley will discuss the history and contents of the U.S. Congressional Serial Set for Family History Research. I'm going to forward the slides. Here we go. The presentation will include African American genealogy and a demonstration of the digital version of the serial set. Mr. Hartley is the Chief Librarian of the National Archives Library Information Center, also known as ALIC. He earned a BA in History from Dickinson College and an MA and MLS from the University of Maryland, College Park. He has worked in ALIC for 25 years and has been Chief Librarian since 2004. And now for our presentation on genealogy research using the U.S. Congressional Serial Set. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speaker, Mr. Jeff Hartley. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I guess I should sort of manage expectations a little bit, I think, first as to what the serial set is and what it means for genealogical research. This is not the place that you're going to start your genealogical research. You're not going to find census records. You're not going to find ship's passenger lists. You're not going to find a lot of lineage data sort of in the serial set. But what you'll find, and I hope I'll give you a good sense of the breadth and depth of the serial set, is maybe some information that's going to help you advance your research, may provide you with a geographic location with one of your ancestors' names to see what they were doing, where they were doing it, perhaps at a certain point in time. In essence, I think it's more of a tool to add to your genealogical toolbox, and one to keep in mind if there is some connection to one of your ancestors to the federal government, that it's possible that reference to that activity may show up in the serial set. So. Also, the beauty of the serial set is that you don't have to be here at the National Archives to do it. Most of the Know Your Records lectures relate to records. This is one of the sources that's available in many libraries across the country. You may find it in paper, you may find it in microfiche, you may find it online. We're going to take a look at the online version that we have here in just a bit. But again, it's something that's fairly accessible throughout the country. Since its inception, the United States government has gathered information, held hearings, compiled reports, and published those hearings in literally millions of pages, the majority of which have been published by the government printing office or its predecessors with the commercial publishers like Duff Green and Gale and Seton. These publications include annual reports of the various executive branch agencies, congressional hearings and documents, registers of employees, telephone directories. And we're not going to go too far into government documents beyond that, other than to say that the serial set is a government publication. So what is the serial set? Well, it's had many names over the years. It's been called the sheep set because of the bindings that are used for it, sheepskin as opposed to cloth. And at one time it was considered to be the official collective definitive publication documenting the activities of the federal government. It begins in 1817 with the 15th Congress, and was to be the official, as I say, the official publication of the important records of the government. It's changed dramatically since it was first published. There's no official regulations about what should be submitted for publication in the serial set, so various things flowed in and out of it, depending on the year in question. And then since it started in the 15th Congress, they also decided at the same time to retroactively compile information from the first 14 Congresses, and those are in the American State Papers, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. And the serial set is just that. It's a numerical set of publications, starting with one, going up to more than 15,000 volumes today. It is still produced today. There's more than 325,000 individual documents represented in the serial set, and it totals more than 11 million pages. So there's a little bit of something in there, I think, for everyone, and I hope, again, that you'll get a sense of that from the presentation as we go on. So I mentioned the American State Papers. These are the reports and documents of the first 14 Congresses. There's 38 volumes arranged by subject, and those subjects are foreign relations, Indian affairs, finance, commerce and navigation, military affairs, naval affairs, the post office, public lands, claims, and miscellaneous. For genealogists, probably the most useful volumes are the public lands and claims volumes, but it is absolutely possible to find some other useful information in the others as well. It is the only part of the serial set that is subject-oriented, and each volume has its own index, and most have a table of contents as well. There's 6,278 documents in the American State Papers. And of the 38 volumes, they are all, where you look at them on the shelf, they will be numbered with a 0 in front, so that chronologically they're shelved prior to the volume 1 of the real serial set. Just to give you an idea of what those volumes look like, this is a couple from the American State Papers from our collections. You'll see that they're fairly large volumes. They're still good paper. The bindings are bad. You can see some of ours have been rebound. You'll also see that some of the call numbers here are actually Library of Congress classification numbers. Many libraries may have them classified that way as well. So what's included in the serial set? Well, there's House and Senate journals until 1953. There's House reports, House and Senate documents, Senate treaty documents, Senate executive documents, and miscellaneous reports. And what these all amount to is just a wealth of information, particularly for the 19th century. You get the presidential messages, including vetoes, reports on the budgets and appropriations, the President's annual State of the Union address, annual reports of the federal agencies. Back in the 19th century, these were more than the fluff pieces that they are today, so there's actually substantial and substantive information in them. Works of reference value, things like the Biographical Directory of the United States Congress, the Constitution of the United States, Analysis and Interpretation. There's congressional journals, administrative reports, directories, manuals, and related internal congressional publications, reports on public and private legislation that Congress is considering, and reports that have resulted from commissions where Congress has commissioned that certain investigations be conducted. There's extended series of surveys, research, and statistical publications, and there's also annual or special reports from non-federal agencies, places like the Daughters of the American Revolution or the American Historical Association. We'll take a look at some of those in just a bit. The Court of Claims reports show up for several years. And basically for the 19th century, it is indeed all the activities of the entire government. Without regard to cost or size of printing or maintaining, private printers made gobs of money printing the serial set, but we still have it, and that's a good thing. The serial set reflects the changes in the United States. In 1817, when it starts, there were 19 states, and all but one of those was east of the Mississippi River, and the reports deal primarily with congressional concerns. By 1900, the country has expanded to the west, the Industrial Revolution has occurred, and there's many, many reports on scientific and technological advances. You have the reports from the Smithsonian Institution, the National Academy of Sciences. You can find dictionaries of Indian languages and treatises on ancient Korean cultures and information on social and medical issues, reports on cholera, examinations of social conditions. So for genealogists, it's certainly, at least in that regard, some background material and firsthand accounts of things that happened that may have affected your ancestors. Get a lot of information about social conditions in the post-Civil War South, including reports on Ku Klux Klan activity and reports of the Surgeon General on public health. There's information about agriculture, minerals, and natural resources. And as I say, even some on the arts, sculpture, music, and such. The sheer size of the serial set makes it unwieldy to find something, but currently we have digitized versions, which make it a lot easier than it used to be. And then you'll find also that many of the reports are duplicated. You'll find a House version, you'll find a Senate version, and These are just extra access points for a lot of these important reports. But what exactly is in the Congressional serial set for genealogists? Well, there's lists of Revolutionary War, War of 1812, Civil War pensioners, anyone who sent an individual action to Congress for relief. There's lists of those who were granted patents. There's land grant laws and those who petitioned Congress to receive a land grant for service. The correspondence of officers, the records of the official records of the War of the Rebellion. The official register of government employees shows up for about 10 years in the Congressional serial set. I'm not sure why it's only 10 years. It's one of those publications that's moved around from State Department to Interior and to Census Bureau within Commerce. But 1883 to 1893, you can find the list of all the government employees at the time. There's information about expeditions by explorers like John C. Fremont, Lewis and Clark, and John Wesley Powell. And these reports include text and other drawings, maps, and again, we'll take a look at some of those. There's information about Native Americans, such as a list of those that were charged with fraudulent enrollment from the Osage Indian tribe. There's also land surveys and post office routes. Again, military registers. There's some census statistics. There's not, again, not a lot of census record information, but you'll find statistics and some corrections of records. There's lighthouse reports. There's Daughters of the American Revolution grave registers, petitions and memorials, information about lighthouse keepers, and again, just a wealth of material. So how do you find information in the serial set? Before we take a look at some of the examples of these things. These are some of the most useful indexes. There's the CIS index, the checklist of U.S. public documents 1789 to 1909, also known as the 1909 checklist, Grassroots of America, and the digital versions. And I have to say, the kinds of classes I used to hate in library school were the ones where they would say, well, this index exists and it has this sort of it's arranged by this, in this way, and it's got this. And I think to really to use these just to get involved in them and know what's in them is the way to find out what's in them. So I'm not going to go through all of the types of material of these indexes. I will at least just show you a title page from the CIS serial set index. Many libraries may still have this in paper. You can find some versions of the serial set on the Library of Congress's Century of Lawmaking website. You can see there on the lower left side there, it says American State Papers and U.S. Serial Set. The whole serial set is not there. It is just selected parts. But then the one that we have here at the National Archives is the one by now available through ProQuest. This link will only work if you are attached to a National Archives computer or a computer that's attached to the National Archives network. It may be also, a lot of colleges and universities have also purchased access to it, so you may be able to find them there. And at the end of the presentation, we'll take a look at that and just show you how to work through it. So, what I'd also like to do now is take a look at some of the types of publications and just give you some examples, show you what sort of information that Congress collected in these reports. And the majority of these images do come from our CIS version, so the ProQuest version. So first we have an example of a report on census data correction. This comes from the 22nd Congress First Session, 1832. And this is not the sort of thing that you're going to find when you're looking at the actual census records, but it does help to explain some of what you're seeing there, especially if one of the individuals is the focus of your research. Congress asked for information about erroneous returns of slaves from the 5th census in Massachusetts, Maine, and Ohio, and the Department of State provided the following statements concerning them, such as these for the 4 listed for Massachusetts. One is returned by George Wardwell, Assistant to the Marshal of Massachusetts, as being in the family of Joseph Cummings of the town of Andover in Essex County, a female of the age 100 years and upwards. One returned by Tyler Goddard, Assistant, as being in the family of Prince Walker of the town of Barr in Worcester County, a female of the age 100 years and upwards. One returned in the abstract as being in Hampshire County, town of West Hampton, and one as being in the town of Worthington, should have been returned as free persons of color, but by the examiner in this department were set down in the recapitulation as slaves by placing them, through inadvertence, in the column of slaves instead of that of free persons of color. This error not affecting the total population more easily escaped detection. And turning the page, we get similar statements in Maine and Ohio. 10 years later, Congress is still questioning the census data, this time for slaves listed in Connecticut in the 6th census. In this case, we learned from William Weaver that the Marshal of Connecticut has informed him personally, quote, that under the head of the number of slaves returned from his district, 37 were Negroes of the Amistad. The note in the abstract to that effect was made upon the returns under his direction. And I think the inclusion just of the name Amistad without any other text really shows just how well known and important a case this was at the time. And page 2 of the report shows the breakdown by gender and age of those 37 individuals. Now we turn to an 1830 private land claim, in this case titled Archibald Jackson from February of 1831. And this report actually relates to the service of James Gammons, who was his slave. At the time of his enlistment in service, Gammons was the slave of said Archibald Jackson, who neither consented to the enlistment but permitted him to remain in the service. Jackson, as the owner of Gammons, after his death, claimed the extra and back pay amounting to $37.42 and the bounty land. The pay was allowed by the War Department and paid to Jackson, and the committee basically found that the owner of the slave is entitled to all of his property and therefore reported back to the Secretary of War that the land grant should be issued to Archibald Jackson rather than Gammons and his family. Oh, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. She's doing a good job.
Yeah, okay. Next, we have a land claim. This is relates to land activities prior to 1810, west of the Perdido and east of the Mississippi. It was felt that these lands were outside of the Treaty of Spain in 1819, which ceded East and West Florida to the United States. So we get a discussion of the act and the issues related to it. And then moving into the report, we come to this transcript from Register C, a list of claimants from Spanish, British, or French governments, which lists the present claimants, the original claimants, the date, the nature of the claim, and the amount of land involved. You can see here that Anthony Grass, January 20th, 1804, 3,000 arpents of land, etc. And it continues on to the next page, and there's several lists throughout the report. The next example is a list of clerks in the various departments of the Treasury in 1833. And we can see that the dates of appointment, the annual salary, and the amount paid through the various auditors' offices. So here we get the continuation of that document. Returning back to some land information, this is an 1820 report from the land commissioners at Jackson Court House related to land around New Orleans. We get a discussion of information that they've sent various files related to certain individuals. And then further in the report, we get a list of the actual settlers, including information about a John Joseph Jourdain who inhabited the area and cultivated it for 15 years prior to the United States taking possession of it. The serial set also contains lots of memorials and petitions. This is one from 1834 from the citizens of Brownville, Pennsylvania, concerning the public debt in the Bank of the United States. This particular volume is full of memorials from towns and counties in all of the states, some for and some against the bank, and outlines their reasons why. And many, like this one, toward the end, have a list of all of the inhabitants that were signing for this petition, and provides some information. I think this is useful. The petition's 1834. It's between the two censuses. If you're looking for a certain name and you find one of your ancestors, you weren't sure when he or she died, well, at least if they show up on this list, you know that they were still alive in 1834. And you have their occupation. So we have lots of constables and laborers and ship's carpenters and blacksmiths and paper makers from Brownsville, Pennsylvania. The next report is entitled The Failure of the Scheme for the Colonization of Negroes in Mexico from the 54th Congress in 1896. Apparently over 800 individuals were convinced to go join a colony in Mexico in September of 1894. Most left from Alabama and Georgia. And while they were there, Sam Claber, one of the 800, claimed that they were cruelly treated, and another, Anthony Jones, claimed that he and 39 others had stolen away, but were overtaken by a party of armed Mexican guards who proceeded to shoot and kill 38 of them when they refused to return to the colony. Jones himself died, so they did not get his sworn statement, but get this one from Klaber, and it outlines that he was born in Tuscaloosa, was married with 2 children, and he states that any attempt to leave the colony would have been punished by death. Further in the report, we get a refutation by W.H. Ellis about the report of 38 being killed, including an affidavit signed by some of those who were supposed to have been killed. This part of the report also includes information about what Ellis would provide to the colonists. 60 acres, 40 of which was to be planted in cotton and 15 in corn, and the other 5 in vegetables for their sustenance. The agreement also included free tools, water, mules, and seeds. The cost of transporting them was to be paid over the course of the first several years' crops, and the contract was between the individuals and the Agricultural, Industrial, and Colonization Company of Tawahililo Limited. As we move through the report, we find a list of names. We get the list that starts the list of arrivals from February 6, 1895. And we get the whole family here of the Cardwells from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We have Joe, who's 15, and Matthew, who's 13, and Vesta, who's 11, and so on. And it goes through all of the individuals that arrived. Later in the report, we get a list of those who died at Camp Jenner, Texas, while under the charge of the Marine Hospital Service. And we can see that most of them were from confluent variola, which is smallpox. Finally, in the report, we get an advertisement from the company just to see what drew these people to want to go to settle in Mexico. It has passages like, "We wish to impress on your minds that the great Republic of Mexico extends to all of its citizens the same treatment, equal rights to all, special privileges to none. Send in your lists of families and names at once, or you will get left. All kinds of fine game, such as deer, buck, bear, duck, wild geese, and all manner of small game, as well as opossum. Provisions are worth half of what they are in the United States. There will be 1 church and 1 schoolhouse to each 100 families. You select your own preacher from among yourselves. Lands can be bought up in the state of Durango cheaper than you can fertilize an acre in the state of Georgia or Alabama to raise a bale of cotton." So it was a very attractive sort of thing, but just did not go very well. But again, you've got several clues there. You've got lists of names, some information about their families, and perhaps some other information about military records, those that died in the hospital service or the like. So you've got some opportunities to locate some additional information. I mentioned before that there's annual reports from institutions that are not part of the federal government, and we'll take a look at one here from the Columbia Institution for the Deaf, the school that becomes Gallaudet University. Provides information about the school's activities and rosters of students in their home states. This is the first page of the report from 1867, and you can see Gallaudet's name is on there as a faculty professor of moral and political science. Then we get a description of the school year, this one marred by the loss of several students, one to gastric fever and several to a drowning incident. Quote, "Consolation being allowed us in the hope that they were not unprepared to meet the sudden and unexpected summons." It goes on the next page to discuss their characters, such as Mr. Hollowell of the preparatory class was a young man of high moral and intellectual aspirations, meditative habits, an impressible and somewhat romantic temperament, and was gifted with imagination and poetic sensibility in no common degree. His temper and disposition were most amiable and lovely. He was reverent and conscientious, and heart overflowing with love to his fellow men and to all the creatures of God. The report goes on to provide a roster of all the students, provides their names, which class they were in, where they were coming from, most of them from D.C. and Maryland. And that's the final part of that list. Daughters of the American Revolution Annual Report shows up a number of times in the Congressional serial set as well. And the reason for a lot of these showing up is that these are congressionally chartered organizations. Congress has sort of given their imprint to these organizations, and in so doing has asked that they report back to them on their activities. And once they do that, those have been published in the serial set. They are no longer published in the serial set, but again, for many years, you can find them. And they're a wealth of information with lists of members, the graves, information about the graves of Revolutionary War soldiers, information on historic sites, historic buildings, and local historical investigations, trails, and memorials. So we'll take a look here at the 23rd report from 1915. and just give you a sense of some of the information from the that's provided here. We have information on Asa Briggs, who was married in December of 1777 to Elizabeth Paul. Gives her birth date and death date. We learned that he served 11 months as an orderly sergeant, 2 months as a carpenter's mate on the various ships, 5 months with Captain Moore from Vermont, etc. That he died in October of 1833, and that he's buried in the Gordon Prairie Cemetery. And so, again, just a wealth of information, the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect to necessarily find in a government publication from this private organization. I also mentioned patents, and then we'll take a look at a few of these reports. The annual report for the Commissioner of Patents provides the patented lists of the patented ideas, the names of the inventors, their patent numbers, the date of the patent, and the publication information in the official Patent Office Gazette. They also include indexes, so if you're not sure what you're looking for, you can just scroll through each annual report and see. And here we have an entry for an African-American inventor named Thomas Elkins, a patent for a refrigerating apparatus from 1879. Now, it doesn't say what sort of apparatus it is until you look through the report and find this image, and we learn that it's actually a refrigerating apparatus to chill human corpses. In 1865, again, we have some similar information, in this case for an artificial leg by a man named Jewett. And later in the report, you get this large description of the artificial leg and the benefits that it provided over others that had been patented, as well as drawings. And one there on the far right, I'll blow it up a little bit there, you can see the Jewett artificial leg. And just sort of keep that in mind. We'll sort of circle back to this idea of artificial legs in just a moment. Finally, for 1910, just to show you a little bit of the evolution of the annual reports for the Commissioner of Patents, this is a much denser list. Here's a couple of lines from it. The one I was focusing on actually was the automobile horn by L.B. Buchanan on the right. Serendipitously, look to the left and find that one T.A. Edison has a patent for an automobile in that same volume. When you go to find the entry for it, for Buchanan's horn, again, it's very much more bare bones. You learn who the assigner is. You do get the numbers. You do get the information from the Gazette. But you no longer get the drawings or as complete a description, mostly because so much has occurred those years that the volumes would have just been absolutely enormous and unwieldy to have produced. So that's a lot of sort of civilian information. But there's also a lot of military information in the serial set. And we're going to take a look at some Army registers, some pardons, some information on chaplains and pensions, and the like. Again, just to give you a sense of the kinds of information that you can find here. So we'll start with this 1818 list of persons added to the pension lists. This one for Pennsylvania. This list is of half-pay pensions for people and includes the number of the certificate, the name of the guardian of the heir of the deceased soldiers, the original claimants, his rank, and the pay per month. A little later, we have this 1883 list of pensioners on the roll, which is probably one of the most frequently used publications in our library. This is a 5-volume set, 18 years after the end of the Civil War. We'll take a look at this page for the Mid-Atlantic states, for Delaware, and we can see that these are all widows. We get, or some widows, others why they're receiving the pension for gunshot wound in the left arm, gunshot wound in the shoulder or the hand. But you get the information on their monthly rate, the date of the allowance, and their pension certificate number as well. I mentioned Army registers. Not all of the Army registers appear in the serial set, but this one from 1851 does. And interestingly enough, the 1851 follows it in the same volume. This one may be a little hard to read or see, but again, you get information on the, in this case, the 6th Regiment of Infantry. We can see the colonel was Newman S. Clark. He'd been breveted Brigadier General in 1847, and get information about his pay and other remunerations. There's also information about pardons in the serial set. In this case, This additional list of pardons relates to pardons of those that were involved in the Confederate States. And so that we have rebel commissary agents, members of the rebel government, rebel route agents, blockade runners, rebel commissary agents, information about who supported their pardon, and the date of that pardon. Within the serial set, as I said before, it's over 15,000 volumes. I've been working with it for 25 years, and you really can't begin to know everything that's in there. You can hope that you know of what a connection might be, but there's still some surprises, and even after 25 years of working with it, and I just wanted to share a couple of those with you. And the first is this report on limbs and prostheses, and I mentioned before we're going to return back to that patent that we looked at. I received a reference query concerning a letter from the Secretary of War and a reply from Barnes, the Surgeon General, dated May 10, 1866. And included with it was a brief entry from the National Archives Guide to Federal Records concerning records related to prosthetic appliances and a page from the Congressional Record. So I started out looking for this, and after several this would be sort of almost before we had the digital version. After several dead ends, terms I used were glommed onto as artificial limbs. And so here's the letter from the Secretary of War, followed by that from the Surgeon General, the date's right. And this sadly sizable report of 128 pages describing the artificial limbs that the government has furnished individuals. And here's a list of the persons or firms that are manufacturers of the artificial limbs. And midway down we can see that there's George B. Jewett of Salem, Massachusetts, the holder of that patent. There's actually several Jewetts on the list here. And it starts with this list, provides the name and rank of the soldier, the regiment, the state and company, the residence, the cost of the limb, and the date it was furnished to them, as well as the manufacturer. So, again, not something I expected to find, but it helps provide some additional information about individuals, and is especially interesting if any of them are your ancestors. Another example is this report from the Adjutant General of the state of Arkansas. I'm not sure if you're familiar with state adjutant general's reports, but for us, they're fairly important. Each is different, but especially for following the Civil War, they provide brief history of the units, lists of names, what happened to them, their terms of enlistment, and such. And our set for the Union is fairly complete in the archives library. We have a few for the Confederacy as well. And in looking through the digitized version here of the serial set, I was surprised to find this one for Arkansas. And it's not for Confederate soldiers, but it's rather for Arkansas soldiers who fought for the Union. Provides some information about the gathering of soldiers there for the Union. Moves through that description. And then, like most of the other reports, provides information about all of the individuals. In this case, this is a page about the 1st Regiment of Arkansas Cavalry Volunteers, mustered into service in 1862, lists of names those were killed or died from non-military causes. And at the end, after a list of those, provides some memoranda and information about where the unit went, what battles it fought in, and that sort of thing. It's just very dense, but informative. And lastly, I want to leave, before we go to the online version of the serial set, just to show you some of the beautiful things that are in this. This isn't so pretty. It's prettier in print, and I just wanted to use an example because the online version is digitized in black and white. This is a map of the Alaska goldfields. And I don't have a color scan of it, unfortunately, but I do have some color scans from the serial set. This is an 1884 map from the Commissioner of the General Land Office of the United States and its territories. It provides information on the states and territories covered by the Public Land Survey, including Alaska. This is a map from the official records of the War of the Rebellion Atlas of Texas and New Mexico. It shows railroads, roads, cities and towns, rivers, lakes, forts. This dates, actually, the map itself predates the Civil War from 1857. And finally, just this map of St. Helena District in Louisiana, just at the north part of Lake Pontchartrain. So I hope this has given you a sense of what's in the serial set, with the sorts of information that may be there. It's definitely not a starting point, but it may provide you information on an ancestor. It may provide you background information about activities that they were involved with. It may point to other records that may be here at the National Archives. The real way to use it is that, like I say, it's not where you're going to start. If there's a likely reason, go ahead and search it. Put your names in and see what comes up. And that's certainly much easier these days with the online version. So I think I'd like to take a look at that if I can. There we go. So we'll see how our internet connection holds here. There we go. Okay. So this is what it would look like when you come to it. As I say, this is was originally just digitized by LexisNexis, and they sold it to ProQuest, so it's available through ProQuest now. And let me just show you how easy it is to search. I'll put in John McDonough, and John McDonough was a businessman and philanthropist active in Baltimore and New Orleans in the 18th century. And we can see here that we have several reports related to his claims in Louisiana. We'll click on the first one here just to show you what the citation looks like. All of them are available in PDF, and we can download that. I won't waste our time doing that. The one thing I want to caution you about when you do use this serial set this way, though, is where it says email here, the only thing it's going to do is email you the citation. You're not going to get the PDF for it. So be sure to print something out or download it before you leave if you're using our version. This one is only one page, so there's only one file. If a document shows up that's larger than 50 pages, they'll break it down into 50-page chunks to make downloading a little bit easier. You can get it in one full size, or you can just get the pages that you need that way. You can search for just maps. You can search for individual names. Let's just go ahead and take a look at this linguistic map from 1920. If there is a map that provides all the details, and ProQuest gives you a nice way of looking at the map too. This one's not quite as nice as some of those others we looked at, but you have the wherewithal to make the map larger, take a look at it more closely, things like that. Does anybody have anything they'd like me to search on to see if there's anything in here from the audience? Either way. Yes, sir.
The name John Willis Menard.
Okay, I'm going to need you to spell that, please. Let me just get to the search window. John.
John Willis is the middle name. Menard, Menard.
Okay. So here we go. We have the contested elections, 2nd District of Louisiana, Part 2, J. Willis Menard and Caleb Hunt, claiming a seat for unexpired terms of term of James Mann. Let's take a look. You can see it's a House miscellaneous document from 1868, 7 pages, and let's just go ahead and pull it up. And, nice fast internet. There we go. So there's additional papers related to that. So a successful search. And there's other documents as well. Yes?
If there were several hundred hits, could you show one that would be at the very bottom of?
Sure. The question was if there were several hundred hits, could we see one that's at the bottom to see what they look like? Absolutely. Let's go back here. So we had 745. we'll take a look here at number 181. And the other thing I should point out to ProQuest, when it has a large document, and this one is 1,300 pages, will provide which parts have hits on the terms that you've searched on. So most of these have John, here's Willis, and here's Menard. And my guess is that most of those are not going to be necessarily, well, they could be the same individual. We'll pull it up and there's a Menard, company in the looks like the Texas Cavalry. So that one's not looking for the string. It's just looking for the occurrences of those terms in there. So, but still relevant as we put the search in. So, does anyone else have any other questions or thoughts or comments?
Thank you, Jeff. This is Andrea. Can you use Boolean search terms to narrow down Menard? Could you put quotation marks around it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that I sort of was hoping wouldn't come up, because yesterday when I was just sort of going over this, this question mark over here provides the help, and there's information about how to set up a search. Here, building a search string. Yes, you absolutely can. I found that what I was getting from some of the results was not quite what it was telling me that I should get. And the and, it's basically ending everything together to begin with. So in the case, where we did the Menard or the John McDonough's, it's looking for John and McDonough. And the first ones that came up were certainly the most relevant. But all of the hits should have had those terms, or at least one of them, in it. You can also do some near searching. You can do like a so theoretically that one would allow for John within 2 spaces of McDonough, so that it would be a much more relevant sort of search. I forget what the number we had before was, but here it is 48. There's some of those same ones. The 4th or 5th one dropped off. The 5th one was a hearing related to the nomination of John Bolton, was a graduate of the McDonough School. That came up in the first one. That doesn't show up here. So it does certainly affect how you're searching, so you can use those.
While we're waiting for more questions from our audience, I was wondering if you could do something very basic. Tell us spell out the URL, the address to get to this web page that we're on now.
It'll only work for a computer if you're attached to the National Archives network. So it's just congressional.proquest.com when you're on site. If you're off site and you don't have access to it, it'll ask for an account and password, and you won't be able to use it, unfortunately. But
so at any National Archives facility, we can access this.
That is
and
correct.
I believe a lot of libraries.
A lot of colleges and libraries have purchased access to it as well. And you may find the serial set if they have not. As I say, the Congressional Information Service microfiched it at the same time that they did those print indexes. There's definitely multiple ways to locate information and copies of these documents.
Thank you. This time I do not have any questions from our online audience. Do we have any more from anyone here on site?
I'm curious, you mentioned 1883 to 1893 for federal roster. Do they identify Negroes?
The question was whether I mentioned that the official register is in there for 10 years, and the question was whether they identify Negroes. I don't think I know the answer to that question, to be honest. I think it's a list of all government employees, from clerks on up to secretaries of the agency. It does not indicate anyone's race. It just is employees. So I would assume that, yes, they are listed there, but you don't know what race they are. So.
Oh, If we have any more questions that occur to you after the program, feel free to submit them to our sort of a generic way to ask us questions, and that is to inquire at nara.gov. That's INQUIRE at NARA.gov. And if you'll give me a moment, I'm going to step up there with Mr. Hartley. So I'd like to thank you so much. It was an amazing amount of information that you provided to us very quickly. So for those of you who have joined us on site, there are handouts, and if you want to wait just 5 minutes, I can print them out. I've neglected to do that, and I can bring those to you. If you're watching online, you can also download them. They're on this webpage. If you look right under the screen, you'll see several hyperlinks, and you'll see presentation slides and handout, and you can just download that material right from there. So are there any more questions before we leave? Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your coming out here today. Thank you. That concludes our presentation today. Thank you so much. Yes, it's available now. If you were